Members, we have a quorum and it is the appointed time. No information papers have been issued since the last meeting. Yesterday, I received letters from several FTU members. They have been tabled. This is in relation to the item concerning the fare increase applications from franchise bus operators. The members think today's meeting will not be sufficient for our discussion. Let's see what happens. The first two items will take up less time. If there are lots of members waiting to speak, I will consider adding a meeting for the item. Now we may proceed at a rather fast pace for the first two items. If you would like to speak in the last item, please come to the meeting room earlier. The next meeting will be held on the 21st of April. Items for discussion at the next meeting will be real-time adaptive traffic signal system, as shown on the list of outstanding items for discussion, and open space for public vehicle park at Yanzhou Street West in Sham Shui Po, and updates on car parking initiatives. Please refer to item 1 and 2 on the list of outstanding items for discussion. Any questions? If not, that is decided. Then we move on to item 3, 6197TB pedestrian walkway system between Hing Road and Tai Wo Hao Road. Will the administration please come in? I remind members, according to Rules of Procedure 83A, if you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest concerning the items for discussion today, members should disclose the nature of such interest before they speak. Members who would like to ask questions concerning this item, please press the button now.
好，咁而家如果政府準備好
Now, administration, ready when you are, please give us the briefing. Ms. Amy Wong, thank you. This is work 197TB pedestrian walkway system between Hing Road and Tai Wo Hao Road. We propose to upgrade it to Category A. At present, pedestrians rely on a stairway linking Hing Road and Tai Wo Hao Road with a level difference of about 18 meters, that is about 6 stories high, to access Tai Wo Hao Road near Kwai Hing MTR station and areas near Kwai Shing East, including a number of schools and Kwai Shing East estates. To improve the accessibility of the residential areas, the community facilities, and the transport facilities between the uphill areas and Kwai Hing MTR station, through the provision of a more comfortable and convenient covered pedestrian walkway system, we propose to build a covered two-way automated escalator and staircase with stair lifts connecting the two places. The expected usage number will be around 11,000 pedestrians per day. The capital cost is estimated at $209.3 million. We hope members will support our proposal so that we can submit the item to the Public Works Subcommittee and to the FC. We plan to start tendering projects and complete the project within 3 years. For that purpose, in February this year, the Highways Department has initiated parallel tendering for the project and will award the contract after obtaining funding approval from the FC. Now I will invite the Highways Department to give a PowerPoint presentation and then we will take questions. Yes, Mr. Thomas Wong from the Highways Department, please be brief. I will now brief members on the project that we propose to upgrade to Category 2, 197TB pedestrian walkway system between Hing Road and Tai Wo Hao Road. At present, pedestrians rely on a stairway linking Hing Road and Tai Wo Hao Road with a level difference of about 18 meters, that is about 6 stories high. as shown in the blue area on the slide, to access Tai Wo Ho Road near Kwai Hing MTR station and areas near Kwai Shing East, that is schools and Kwai Shing East estates. Now we propose to provide a comfortable and convenient covered pedestrian walkway system to connect Hing Shing Road and Tai Wo Ho Road. After the project's completion, residents in the neighborhood can rely on the walkway system to access the uphill schools and Kwai Shing East estate, as well as the downhill areas with the MTR station. This will enhance the accessibility of the residential areas, community facilities, and the transport facilities between the uphill areas and the Kwai Hing MTR station. We expect the pedestrian flow of the project will be about 11,000 pedestrians per day. Now this is the illustration. The proposed work area include 3 items. First, demolition of the staircase connecting Hing Shing Road and Tai Wo Ho Road. 2, construction of a covered 2-way escalator and staircase connecting Hing Shing Road and Tai Wo Ho Road with stair lifts. 3, ancillary works including road, drainage, geotechnical, utilities diversion, public lighting, landscaping, E&M works, and construction of retaining wall and reprovisioning of affected structures and facilities. Now we will now play a computer rendering of the completed project. The next step, well, the estimated cost is $209.3 million, subject to the approval of this panel. We plan to seek support from the Public Works Subcommittee within the legislative session, as well as for funding from the FC. For swift starts of the work, we have initiated parallel tendering for the construction works contract in February this year. However, we will only award the contract after obtaining funding approval from the FC. We expect the project to be completed within 3 years. Thank you. Right. We have 2 members for this item. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Now, this is a proposed walkway system between Hing Shing Road and Tai Wo Ho Road. It is in line with the assessment criteria set out in 2009 by the government. I support the work proposal. Currently, pedestrians accessing Tai Wo Ho Road and the Kwai Shing East estate, now they have to overcome a level difference of about 18 meters, 6 stories high level difference. It is very inconvenient. Now, I noticed that the government has consulted the Transport and Traffic and Transport Committee of the Kwai Shing District Council in 2021, and District Council supported the project. Now, some residents queried why wasn't a lift tower built instead. Now, I think the document then was more comprehensive than the paper today. There was a cross-section rendering and also a layout plan for the project. The reason behind the decision was that if a 6-story high lift tower was to be built, it would affect the cityscape near Kwai Hong Court and also the new Kwai Hing Garden. If you look at the layouts plan and so on, you can see that the project will impose less impact on the aesthetic of the area near the school, but it is very near to the Kwai Hong Court. So why don't we keep the original staircase and build a 6-meter tall lift tower on the other side? That would cause the minimum impact. There are many residents living in the Kwai Hong Court. Residents on many floors will be affected by the construction, including the construction noise and light pollution. So why don't you simply build a lift tower near Kwai Hing Road? But we know the government is very experienced in terms of the universal accessibility program. Maybe that would be a better decision in terms of cause and effect. Mr. Wong? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for your view. In the initial stage of the project, we did consider building a lift tower plus a footbridge. However, there were objections from schools and the nearby housing estates concerning privacy and security, as well as the aesthetics. They had reservation as well as objection to our original plan. That's how we came to the design we have now. That is an escalator along the slope. We have taken into consideration different views to minimize the impact on aesthetics, security, and privacy. That's the reason behind our design. Chair, we understand that we have to consider the privacy and the impact on views. Now, this escalator will bring pedestrian from the ground level to 18 meters high. It would actually cause a bigger impact on the privacy to residents on higher floors. Please be brief, Mr. Chan. Have you consulted the residents? Do they think an escalator is better than a lift tower? Yes, I will be brief in answering the question. Now, the design is that the escalator is very close to the slope. We have consulted the residents in the nearby housing estates concerning their concerns over privacy and view. Then they think the current design is acceptable. Thank you. My turn. According to the stakeholders, they support the design. This is the remaining item under the uphill escalator project. So the project has been initiated a very long time ago. The new escalator will bring much convenience to the school as well as the residents in the nearby housing estates. Now, my concern is the construction process. We have 2 schools nearby, and the Kwai Hong Court is very close to the site, and residents are very concerned about the noise. So how will you mitigate the noise generated during the construction? And once excavation and once work starts, sometimes residents see no workers on site. So can you make sure that you can compress the construction timetable as much as possible to reduce the nuisance?
Thank you, Chairman, for the question. Regarding noise problem, it's true that the construction site is close to the nearby schools and housing estates. In order to minimize noise impact, first we will ensure that the construction will comply with the environmental regulations. We'll also adopt effective mitigation measures. For instance, we will avoid using concussion techniques, and we'll also use more quiet equipment. We'll also pick specific dates, for instance, when schools are having exams, to carry out the construction to minimize the noise problem. We'll also monitor the construction progress to ensure that the contractor will strictly comply with the environmental requirements. Next, we have Mrs. Regina Ip. I would like to take the chance to see whether there are other members who would like to raise questions regarding this item. If not, I'll draw a line here. Yes, Mrs. Regina Ip. Thank you, Chair. I give my support to this project. I'd like to ask about paragraph 15 of the government papers. It says that there will be the resumption of 2 private lots of a small area. What is the use of these private lots, and what compensation will you give to the landowners? And for the $2 million construction cost, I believe it doesn't cover the cost for resuming the private lots. Is that right? Thank you, Mrs. Yip, for the question. On the resumption of private lots, the area involved is very small. We're going to carry out the work on a slope, and the private lots involved are located on the slope as well. It's because when we build the escalators, we need a greater area. That's why we have to resume the private lots on the uphill area. We will, in accordance with the relevant law, that is the relevant compensation regulations. Anyone who owns the private lots involved will be given compensation in accordance with the established mechanism. The amount of compensation is not included in the $209.3 million of cost. Can you tell us whether any landowners will be given compensation, because the area involved is very small and it will be not used for commercial purpose? If there is compensation given, how much? Do you have the relevant information? If not, please provide the information after the meeting. Mr. Tony Che, I give my support to the project. As mentioned by the chair, this is an escalator project in the uphill area. It was proposed back in 2009. There are still 20 projects in the pipeline. Those who are undergoing design stage, there are 9. People have been waiting for very long for these projects. I've learned from the relevant government departments about the operation of the escalators or the stair lift. Information shows that in the past, the key is given to the relevant user to operate the stair lift. According to my understanding, there are no significant complaints over the past decade or so. Would the administration consider enhancing the facilities more actively to provide more convenience to the public, or to provide convenience in particular to people with mobility problems? You can well make changes. You can abandon the key system. You can give out elderly cards, for instance, to use the stair lift. You can use other measures, for example, CCTV system, to prevent people from abusing the facilities. This is my first suggestion. Secondly, this project will involve demolition of existing staircase. I want to know the current usage of the staircase of Tai Wo Hao Road. What will happen to the staircase during the construction progress? Will there be other accessibility facilities for residents during construction? Thank you for the question. Regarding the operation of the stair lift, we thank member for the enhancement proposals. We will talk to the relevant government departments to see how we can enhance the facilities. On the existing staircase connecting Hing Road and Tai Wo Hao Road, it's right that it has to be demolished. During the construction, the staircase will be cordoned off. The residents nearby can use the staircase close to the sports center in the vicinity, or they can go from Tai Wo Hao Road to go to Kwai Hing MTR station and the nearby housing estates. There is a small path near the sports ground in the vicinity, and the walking distance is about 5 minutes or 10 minutes longer compared to the existing staircase. We hope that this construction can be completed as soon as possible because there will be various nuisances caused by the construction. Sorry, Dr. Low, we've drawn the line just now. Mr. Perry Yu. Thank you, Chair. I give my support to these facilitation measures. This project brings back some of my memory. In 2006 or 7, I was in Painting Estate. I tried to fight for adding tile lifts because there was just a one-way escalator that goes up. And a lot of times the elderly people went up and they found out that the escalator was not working. So this project brings back a lot of my memories. I see that there are 4 levels to the project. The good thing about this project is that there will be a two-way escalator. It will provide lots of convenience to the public. Although I encourage people to work out more. If a tile lift is feasible, I think it will be more desirable to a staircase, and the cost for maintenance and repair will not be low, even though if you use energy-saving measures. Which government departments will be responsible for the maintenance and repair works? The question asked by Mr. Tony Che is of my concern as well. This is not a barrier-free facility. You're going to add a stair lift, but I believe very few people will use it. It will just be sitting there. So which government department will be responsible for the maintenance and repair works of the stair lift? Thank you. Thank you, member, for the question. First, on the maintenance and repair works. It is the Highways Department that is responsible for the maintenance of the structures. On electric and mechanical parts, we have engaged the EMSD to be responsible for it. On stair lift, does Ms. Amy Wong have anything to add? On the stair lift, it will be the EMSD that will be responsible for the maintenance and repair works. For day-to-day operation, if there are people in wheelchairs who need to use the stair lift. How are they going to use it? Regarding the procedure of using the stair lift, people in the wheelchair, they have to get a key. And they need to have the relevant valid documents to obtain the key. There will be a stair lift instruction guide or manual given to them. And in front of the stair lift, there will also be a guide. People who need to use the stair lift, they insert the key and they wait for the lift to come. After that, they will insert the key again to the lift and the board will go down so that the user can go up to the platform. They have to comply with the safety instructions to go up to the higher level. I think member is concerned about how easy it will be for users to obtain the key. We hope that the administration can take note of that. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, 2 minutes for you. This item will run until past 11 a.m. I give my support to this project. It involves a 6-story high structure, and it is expected that the forecasted pedestrian flow it will be about 11,000 pedestrians per day. I think the time taken for the project to be finalized is too long. From consultation, well, back in 2009, there was already an assessment mechanism for hillside escalator links and elevator systems. Proposal received. And 18 proposals were received. We're now in 2023. People have been waiting for too long for these facilities. I find it very strange as a representative from the construction industry or engineering industry. I think that the time taken is too long. Yes, Ms. Amy Wong. I think our target is the same. We want the construction work to be completed as soon as possible. Well, during our consultation at the district level, it took quite long because we took several different approaches to consult the relevant stakeholders. In the future, we want to initiate public consultation as soon as possible to expedite the construction work. I see that most members give their support to this project. Hopefully, the administration will perhaps ahead with the project to provide convenience to the public who need to use the stair lift involved. I want to preserve more time for the coming discussion items, so I will conclude this item here. Next item. 100% loan guarantee scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport and taxi trace. Let me invite the government officials into the meeting room. Members who would like to speak, please press the button. Please press the button as soon as possible so that I can have a better grasp of time.
432分鐘，32分鐘，32分鐘，我哋爭取多15分鐘俾後面嗰個議題嚇，4分鐘係啦，432。 好請政府代
So I invite the administration to walk us through the paper briefly. We want to allow as many members to ask questions as possible, but I can only give you 4 minutes. Try to be brief to save more time for the last item. Administration, please. Thank you, Chair. The Financial Secretary, in his 2023-24 budget, proposed to launch 100% loan guarantee schemes for the cross-boundary passenger transport and taxi trades. Today, we would like to consult the members' views on the specifics. In terms of the loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport trade, with the full resumption of normal travel between mainland and Hong Kong, cross-boundary transport trade has resumed. To support the business resumption of the trade, we propose this new loan guarantee scheme so that the trade can take out a loan for resuming services as soon as possible by repairing and maintaining their vehicle or ferry and buying new insurance. Now, for each vehicle and ferry, the upper limits will be $80,000 and so on. Now, we have made reference to the special 100% loan guarantee scheme for SME. The tenure will be 10 years. The loan guarantee coverage will be 100%, and the rate will be the prime rate, that is minus 2.5% per minimum, and the Hong Kong Mortgage Company Insurance Limited will be the guarantor. Now, the commitments will be $400 million. We propose to submit the funding proposal in April this year to the FC so that the scheme can be launched as soon as possible. Making reference to the SME financing loan guarantee scheme, the application period will be 6 months after the launch of the scheme, and we will extend the scheme if necessary. Next, Ms. Ida Lee will introduce the loan scheme for battery e-taxis. Thank you. To further promote the application of e-taxis in Hong Kong, the Financial Secretary in the 2023-24 budget proposed to offer a 100% loan guarantee scheme to the taxi trade to encourage taxi owners to switch to battery e-taxis. We propose that the scheme be applicable to registered taxi owners, including individuals and business entities. They have to prove that the loan proceeds will be used to purchase battery e-taxis. For each e-taxi, the loan amount would be the sales price of a battery e-taxi subject to a cap of $350,000. We have made reference to the special 100% loan scheme. The maximum repayment period is 10 years. The interest rate is the prime rate minus 2.5% per annum. No guarantee fee is required. The HK Mortgage Corporation Insurance Limited will be the guarantor. The commitments will be $6.4 billion for the loan scheme. We plan to submit a funding proposal to the FC in April this year, subject to its approval. We will start accepting application in the middle of this year with an application period of 5 years, which is flexible. Thank you. Thank you. We have 11 members. This item's discussion will take 45 minutes. I will give each member 4 minutes, including questions and answers, but I will keep the time strictly. I also encourage the administration to give brief answers. Mr. Tony Jie, Dominic Lee, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, Bill Tang, Michael Tian, Chen Xiu Hong, Zhao Xiu Chong, Mr. Perry Yiu, Yim Kong, Ben Chen, myself, and Andrew Lam. I will draw a line here. Mr. Tony Jie, thank you. In terms of the loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport trade, the commitment amount is $400 million. And there is also a figure concerning the maximum expenditure. So is that about the default ratio or other expenditures? Concerning the loan scheme for battery e-taxis, and also bear in mind we have the new Transport Energy Fund scheme. Which one is more popular? And also, do you have a target for e-taxis to come along? And also, charging facilities. What is the government doing to increase the number of charging facilities if the schemes are proven to be very popular? Thank you, Chair. In terms of the loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport trade, we have considered the number of vehicles and ferries owned by cross-boundary passenger transport service providers. Now, the expenditure is $140 million. We have reserved a 25% bad debt ratio. That is just an estimation. For the SME financing scheme, the bad debt ratio was not as high as that. So that is just a reserve. And there are actual expenditure, including annual audit, hotline setup, and also expenditure on recovering debt. Deputy Secretary. Concerning the loan scheme for battery e-taxis and also the new energy transport fund scheme, both schemes aim at encouraging owners to switch to e-taxis, but there are differences. Under the new energy transport fund scheme, the main purpose is to subsidize owners to trial use e-taxis. It would subsidize the difference in price between e-taxis and traditional taxis. For loan scheme for battery e-taxis, the actual sales price of a battery e-taxi, subject to a cap of $350,000, can be loaned out, subject to a concessionary interest rate. Now, if the applicant has applied for the new energy transport fund, he can still apply for the loan scheme concerning the remaining amount. Of course, we will look at the financial affordability of the owner and also the age of the taxis. There is not a hard target. But what about an estimation? I don't think you can simply draw this plan without a target. So the application period will be 5 years long. Owners can apply for the loan scheme at different time during the 5-year period. Now, a target is that taxi owners and drivers can switch to e-taxis under the loan scheme. We expect more and more people will come on board. Thank you, Mr. Dominic Lee. Yes, concerning the budget, there is a proposal to offer loan 100% guaranteed loan for the cross-boundary passenger transport trade and taxis. I support it. Now, the loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport trade, for cross-boundary coaches, it is $100,000 for hire cars and $80,000 for ferry, $2 million. That is for repair and maintenance and so on, and insurance. Now, according to the trade, the amount is simply too meager. During the epidemic, the cross-boundary passenger transport trade was the hardest hit. So will the government consider raising the cap? Concerning the loan scheme for e-taxis, well, you couldn't even give us a target or an indicator. If you look at other places, including the mainland. In terms of the transition of different means of transport to electric mode, the country has made a huge effort. In Hong Kong, the pace is simply too slow. You are only offering guaranteed loan to encourage the trade to switch to electric transport. That's why you can't even give us a figure in terms of targets, because we both know the effort is not enough. Now in 6 to 7 years' time, we will have to think about recycling batteries, and there is no plan yet. So besides loan scheme, will there be subsidies for the taxi trade to switch to e-taxis? Mr. Mack, thank you. Concerning the loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport, I thank Mr. Lee for his support. In deciding the cap, we have considered the trades need to repair coaches, hire vehicles, and ferries. We have considered the amount proposed by the trade. We give our heartfelt thanks to the cross-boundary passenger transport trade for preparing for the resumption of cross-boundary travel. They were able to resume their services very quickly after the resumption. We want to offer this loan scheme to speed up their preparation. Various subsidies were offered to the trade during the epidemic. We have the first and third round of anti-epidemic fund in 2021 and 22, and also the ESS. In terms of cross-boundary coaches, a $105,000 per coach subsidy was given to them in all 3 rounds of the AEF. Ms. Lee, thank you. In terms of e-taxis, the government has adopted a multi-pronged approach to encourage the trade to transition to green transport. The loan scheme is only one of them. We are doing more than that. We want to encourage the trade with multiple measures on other measures and charging facilities to help the trade. May I invite the EPD? Sorry, we don't have time. Please be brief. We would help. Yes, it would definitely help the effort. On helping them to get charged, please give us information later. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, thank you. I speak in support of the loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport trade and battery e-taxis. In fact, in dire times, many SMEs were benefited under the special 100% loan guarantee scheme. It helped the cash flow and addressed their immediate need. It helped different industries to various extents. And from experience, we can say that the default ratio is not high. The trade applied the loan for addressing their actual needs, including cash, including liquidity, so it is laudable. Now, many people say that with the resumption of cross-boundary travel, business is coming back. Of course, it is good news. Still, the coaches have parked idling for 3 years. You have to invest a huge sum of money to get it moving again. So I think the loan scheme is really helpful. For the loan scheme for battery e-taxis, the target is to encourage the transition to e-taxis. Of course, the goal is commendable, but charging is really a problem. For owners with a larger taxi fleets, they may get their own charging facilities, but not so for small taxi companies. So you really have to help them overcome this concern to convince them to make the transition. It is not just about money. Now, another question out of the discussion scope, but I have to point it out. The greatest challenge to the transport industry is manpower. We saw 80 years old taxi drivers having accidents recently. It really highlights the plight of the trade. There is no young blood in the industry. Now the unemployment rate has further dropped to 3.3% according to the latest figure. However, the total number of people employed has reduced as well by about 12,000. It highlights the shortage of manpower and the hiring difficulty in various trades. Now, this is not the main discussion topic today, but I have to point it out. I believe the chairman is also concerned as well.
Ms. Ida Lee. On charging facilities, the administration will continue to work to increase the number of provision. On manpower shortage, the administration has rolled out some measures to relax the restrictions for getting the relevant license. We've also conducted review on manpower shortage to monitor the situation in the trade, and we will make targeted approach accordingly. Mr. Bill Tang, I'm in principle support this scheme. Members asked about the indicators. According to policy address, it is expected that by 2027 there will be 3,000 electric taxis. How come you're not unaware of it? It's about 1/6 of the total number of taxis we have. Do you have the charging facilities ready? I have a suggestion. Will the energy company or power companies work with you on rolling out the charging facilities? Do bus companies have the capacity to allow their buses to be charged? I believe a number of bus companies already have their own charging facilities. Will these facilities be able to benefit taxis and other types of vehicles? This will help solve all the problems. We'll be able to roll out 200% loan guarantee scheme instead of 100% loan guarantee scheme. Perhaps you can lower the interest rate or roll out some sort of concessions. For instance, for taxis, if taxi drivers, you can ensure that they install electronic payments. You can allow them to take out more loans. If you can ensure that the taxis are pet-friendly, elderly-friendly, or friendly to people in wheelchair or even tourist-friendly, then perhaps you can offer more benefits to them. For instance, if tourists feel good about the service, then perhaps you can offer more incentives to taxi drivers. How about employees friendly measures? Can you, through this loan scheme, disperse more loans under the condition that the taxi companies employ certain number of employees to run the taxis. You can meet the ESG target if you take this approach. So I hope that the loan scheme can serve more functions and targets. And also I mentioned about the 3,000 taxi targets. And also, can you use franchise bus companies' charging facilities? 3 questions. Yes, Ms. Lee. Thank you, member, for the suggestion. The proposed loan scheme will be rolled out on sort of a pilot basis, and we'll review the results afterwards. We'll take into consideration Mr. Tang's suggestions to see if they are feasible. The 3,000 e-taxi is government's target. We hope that more taxi owners can switch to new battery e-taxis. So 3,000 is not the base number we use to make the calculation. We use the current number of taxis we have in Hong Kong to come up with this $6.4 billion figure. We hope to use different ways to increase the number of charging facilities we have in the future. Next, Mr. Michael Teen. I'm quite happy to see this paper. In the suggestions we submitted to FS, it includes a suggestion on loan scheme for the tourism sector. It's quite similar to what you're proposing here. So I appreciate your effort. On eligibility, the paper mentioned that in any case, vehicle owners or borrowers should not have a debt of over 60 days. They should not have any outstanding default of more than 60 days. According to my understanding, over the past 3 years, there are no borrowers in the trade that have outstanding default of more than 60 days. Well, cash flow problems are quite common. If the threshold is that high, there may not be a lot of people who will be eligible for this. I think it would be more reasonable if you make it the requirement that there should not be any outstanding loan of more than 60 days. I just want you to clarify on this criteria. Thank you, Mr. Teen. We're talking about 60 days before they make the application. We're not saying that within the past 3 years they had to pay off all the debt. It's just that 60 days before they make application, there aren't any outstanding default. I think you have to make it more clear. You have to make the account payable to be current. So I have to make sure that you tell people it's not within the past 3 years that they do not have any outstanding default of more than 60 days. We will make it clear in our promotional leaflets. Thank you. Next, Mr. Chen Xiu-hung. The budget proposed this 100% loan guarantee schemes for cross-boundary passenger transport and taxi trades, and it draws reference from the special 100% loan guarantee product under the SME financing guarantee scheme. I myself and the trade give our support to the loan schemes proposed. I've heard views from the trades, and I understand that they think that it's better than nothing. that you roll out these schemes, but it does not give enough incentive for taxi drivers to switch to e-taxis. The administration has been rolling out various incentives to promote the popularization of e-taxis, for including tax concessions and various discounts. On the price difference between the current vehicles and the new transport vehicles, but this does not give enough incentives. In the mainland, to promote electric vehicles, they have been doing a lot more compared to Hong Kong. They do a lot on the required infrastructure. They provide enough charging facilities, and they have facilities especially dedicated to taxis, but there is insufficient charging facility in Hong Kong. So taxi drivers do not want to waste time to wait for charging facilities. The administration will consider converting petrol filling stations into quick charging stations, taking reference of LPG taxis. I think taxi drivers are worried that when you provide these charging facilities, there will be long queues. So when you roll out these financial incentives, do you have any actual actions that you will take to promote the popularization of electric vehicles? You should not simply roll out the loan schemes without other supporting measures. While you roll out the loan schemes, I think EEB and TLB should seriously think about how we can relieve the concerns of taxi drivers. I think the taxi trades have been doing a lot on their own. They've been thinking about rolling out mobilized charging facilities on vehicles. But how are they going to park these charging vehicles? Are you going to issue penalty tickets if they're parked on the roads? I think the administration should think about it. I'll ask my colleagues from EEB to give a brief response. Dr. Zheng, thank you, member, for the question. I think we're on the same page on this. We do think that supporting facilities or charging facilities are important. We're carrying out different plans now. We're thinking of installing various charging facilities at government premises or premises with short-term tenancy. We have also been talking to relevant power companies. For instance, they can perhaps offer charging facilities at power stations. We've also talked to power companies how they can convert some of their stations into charging facilities, so we are working on it. I want to declare interest. I'm a consultant of a power company. Thank you. Mr. Chao Shu-chung. I give my support to the 100% loan guarantee schemes to help the trade to resume businesses. First question, we see that after the resumption of normal travel, a lot of cross-boundary coaches have been on the road. Well, you're rolling out these loan schemes for bus coaches to cover their maintenance and repair works, but a lot of these coaches or owners of these coaches have already taken out insurance. Are you going to offer other measures to help with their cash flow? Also, you already have this SME financing guarantee scheme in place. Why are you still rolling out this 100% loan guarantee schemes for the trade? Local school buses and coaches, over the past few years, they've been parking their vehicles in graveyards. How come the administration never thought of giving financial assistance to them?
Thank you, Mr. Chow, for your views. For owners of vehicles and ferries for cross-boundary passenger transport who have resumed business, they can also apply for the loan. Of course, there are conditions to be met. That is, in the past 4 years, prior to the announcement of the scheme, they have to be holders of the relevant certificates to be eligible for the loan scheme. Concerning the SME financing guarantee scheme, even if the applicant has been benefited under that scheme, they can still apply for the current loan scheme. That is how we are going to give more support to these businesses. In terms of local non-franchised bus operators, they will also be benefited. They are covered in the plan. Now, the Sports, Culture and Tourism Bureau will consult the Legislative Council in due course. Now, what about the loan scheme or the subsidy scheme for local non-franchised bus? When will it be announced? We will consult the Sports, Culture and Tourism Bureau because they will be responsible for that program. Mr. Perry, you. Thank you, Chair. The loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport trade, well, I give my support reluctantly. Well, is this supposed to be a good thing? No, but I am reluctantly supporting this because we have always been asking the government to give us a recovery fund or resumption of business fund. It is for two purposes. First, to address our immediate need and also to alleviate our immediate manpower shortage. Now, the loan scheme for tourism sector should be able to address our liquidity needs. Now, it seems that the government is ignoring our calls for a fund for resumption of business. You are just giving us a loan scheme, so I am reluctantly supporting it. Now, the repayment period is 10 years. The interest rate is P minus 2.5%. Since the prime rate has been increased recently, the interest rate is still high. And also the cross-boundary transport sector is under immense pressure in terms of operation. Despite resumption of cross-boundary travel, we still face a lot of challenges in the future. I wonder if you have paid a visit to our so-called coaches graveyard or our ferry dock. I think the maximum amount of the loan is too conservative. Now, for ferries, you have to do the regular maintenance, including cleaning the hulls of the ferry. Now, after 3 years' time, you have to replace all the ladders on the seats. Now, for coaches, it is not as simple as refueling the car and do a general check. You have to replace everything from the seatings to other components. So the loan amount is too low. Can you increase it? And also the interest rate is simply too high. If you are really trying to help the trade, can you give us an interest-free loan for the first 2 years and then the P minus 2.5% loan for the remaining 8 years? Thank you. Mr. Perry, you. We fully understand the difficulties faced by the cross-boundary passenger transport trade. That's why during the epidemic, beyond the anti-epidemic fund, we have been offering various subsidies to the trade. Now, with the resumption of cross-boundary travel, we are thankful to the trade for their swift resumption of service. We want to help the operators in terms of liquidity flow. That's why we have this loan scheme. In setting the loan amount, we have considered the views of the trade. We have also estimated the costs involved in repair and maintenance, taking out insurance, and renewing the licenses. And they are covered in the amount. In terms of the interest rate, that is prime rate minus 2.5%. Compared with other commercial banks, it is a favorable interest rate. Through the P minus 2.5% rate, we hope we can help the trade. It is also in line with the concessionary interest rates under the SME financing guarantee scheme. Now, in terms of the car parks for coaches, we understand there are still a lot of coaches parked in the so-called coaches graveyard. We understand there are several procedures to go through before a vehicle can serve again. So starting the 7th of February, as the Kwai Chung container terminal, we have set aside a plot of land for use of coaches, big enough for 180 coaches for repair and maintenance. Thank you. Now, the item will end at 11:45, but we still have 4 members and me, so please keep the time strictly. Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you. Now, with the resumption of cross-boundary travel, we are receiving more and more tourists, and cross-boundary transport demand is increasing. Now, we are going to reach the peak of application for the 100% guaranteed loan. So how can you coordinate with the HKMCI so that the assessments and vetting process can be completed within a reasonable time to ensure that there will not be a gap or lag? Now, you have prepared for a 25% default ratio. It is quite a financial commitment, considering that we have such a huge fiscal deficit. So how can you control the risk? Thank you. Now we have the executive director of the HKMC Insurance Limited with us. So please. Thank you. Concerning Mr. Yim's question, of course, we want to handle the application in the shortest time possible. We are working closely with the banks. We have drawn reference from the SME financing guarantee scheme, and we hope we can apply the experience to make the process smoother. In our experience, if all documents are prepared, we only need a few working days to handle the application. On recovering debts through the participating banks according to their own business policies, we will take forward debt recovery. We will initiate the debt recovery process together with them. Thank you. I declare interest. The group I belong to operates cross-boundary ferry transport. Anything to add? Okay. Mr. Andrew Lam. Back to the question of charging facilities. Now you have set aside $6.4 billion for the replacement of all 18,000 taxis. Well, you expect by 2027, 3,000 e-taxis will come along, although that is doubtful. Now, let's say for the remaining 15,000 e-taxis, I suppose you hope that they will become e-taxis by 2035. Is that so? Now, according to the budget for the next 3 years, at government premises, 7,000 more charging posts will be added for use of e-vehicles. Now, based on these figures, how can you convince us that with what you are doing, do you have a timetable for increasing the number of e-taxis from 3,000 to 18,000, or is it just a fantasy? Dr. Zhang from the EEB. Thank you. You mentioned 7,000 charging posts. Now we aimed at 3,000. We revised our target to have 100% parking space equipped with charging facilities. That's how we come up with the 7,000 figure. It would be available for the use of private cars and taxis, both. On whether we can install charging posts for taxis only at different places, yes, so the number will be even bigger. So you expect we will have 3,000 e-taxis in year 2027, and there are 15,000 down the pipe, down the road. So have you earmarked sufficient money for that purpose? I want to know the plan. It seems that you are just working with what you have. The point is, charging facilities are the most important thing. Some members have given their views. So do you really have a blueprint, or are you just planning along? Thank you. I will invite the EEB to talk about the blueprint. But I would like to say that the loan guarantee scheme for battery e-taxi is supposed to speed up the process. As members mentioned, we need a lot of infrastructure and charging facilities for the switch to happen. But we can't wait until everything is in place before we offer financial incentives. That's why the loan scheme will be valid for 5 years' time. Taxi owners can assess their own situations and apply for the loan to expedite the switch to e-taxis. In terms of the blueprints, I would defer to my colleagues in the EEB. Very briefly, in year 2025, there will be a roadmap for switching private cars and taxis to electric means. I would like to add something. Mr. Zhao Xiuchong asked whether the loan scheme would help local non-franchised bus. Now, on the 27th of March, as the meeting of the panel on economic development, the Sports, Culture and Tourism Bureau will present the plan to the council. Thank you, Mr. Frankie Yik. Now, loan scheme for cross-boundary passenger transport trade, paragraph 4. You said the application period will be within 6 months upon the launch of the scheme and may be reviewed and extended if necessary. I say you must extend it. Now, at the coaches graveyard, there are still 800 coaches parked there without drivers. They need maintenance. You really have to extend the application period. My second question is similar to that of Mr. Zhao Xiuchong. I asked the FS as well. Now, there are coaches or minibuses serving border control points who were also out of business. The FS told me they would be covered, but it seems that they are not covered in the loan scheme. So can you clarify that? And you said if the applicants have an outstanding default of more than 60 days, sorry, they are not eligible. Now, over the past 3 years, everyone was really struggling to stay afloat. Can you be more lenient? Can you offer something like bridging loans to tide them over, to keep them alive?
田北辰議員都
The last question you asked was raised by Mr. Michael Teen, and it has already been addressed. Well, we're proposing a 6-month application period for the loan scheme. We will continue to review the situation of the trade and see if we need to extend the scheme. Currently, under the proposed scheme, ferries and vehicles from the cross-boundary passenger trade will be covered. For current local bus or coaches, the CSTB will roll out relevant loan scheme for them. On eligibility, Mr. Michael Teen also asked about the criteria of not having any outstanding default of more than 60 days. My understanding is that as long as the applicant has been paying for the loan, it doesn't matter whether there is any outstanding default of more than 60 days. All right, for my follow-up question, after the FS meeting, I asked a question about franchised minibuses, and the administration said that franchised minibuses will be covered under the loan schemes. So this scheme will only cover cross-boundary coaches, not franchise minibuses. Is that right? I'm not only referring to franchise minibuses, I'm referring to the minibuses that go to the boundary control points. We will only cover cross-boundary vehicles and ferries under this loan scheme. HKCMI, anything to add? All right. It's now my turn, and afterwards there will be 2 other members to raise questions. I will give 2 minutes to the 3 of us. After that, I will draw a line. I think it is a painful process to offer financial assistance to the cross-boundary passenger transport trades because they are the last ones among all the trades to resume business. They want to have some sort of subsidies or funding, but now they are getting this loan guarantee scheme. As Mr. Frankie Yik said, they have trouble recruiting drivers. So I think in order to help them resume businesses, I think we need a host of various measures. The loan guarantee scheme alone will not be enough. Apart from manpower, they also need all kinds of assistances from the administration. You have to understand that the cross-boundary passenger transport trade is actually linked to other trades. Without cross-boundary transport, how are you going to revive the tourism sector? It looks like we're only targeting the cross-boundary transport trade, but we're actually offering help to other trades as well, or the entire tourism industry. No need to respond to this. It's just an opinion. Mr. Gary Zhang. We're asking taxis to switch to e-taxis. Are you going to take this opportunity to require taxi drivers to add other types of facilities to minimize the impact of collisions? If they're not going to retrofit the facilities on the taxis, they're not going to do it later. Yes, Miss Lee. We want to keep this proposed loan scheme as simple as possible. We want to activate it as soon as possible to offer assistance to the trade. We will consider all kinds of suggestions from members. We'll roll out other measures to see how we can enhance safety of taxis. The administration has been working on this too. Mr. Michael Luke. I'm also concerned about the conversion to e-taxis under the loan scheme. Is it cheaper to get their taxis charged or get LPG or petrol? It's about 40 to 50 cents to get the fuel. If to get the taxis charged, it's about 20 to 30 cents. So it's a difference of about 10 to 20 cents. If you multiply the figure to the daily mileage, perhaps you can save dozens of fuel or energy costs. But it will take them 1 to 2 hours to get the vehicles charged. So what I'm saying is that there isn't a strong incentive for them to switch to e-taxis. What is the original purpose of your loan scheme? Are you going to expedite the phasing out of traditional taxis with this scheme? I see that your loan scheme is not very attractive, and especially given that you do not have dedicated facilities for taxi drivers to charge the e-taxis. Ms. Lee. The government has a long-term goal. As mentioned, there will be a blueprint to be rolled out later. Under this proposed loan scheme, we want to encourage taxi owners or drivers to switch to e-taxis, and this is just one of the schemes that help to work towards our goal. Overall speaking, there are other measures to promote green transport. Sorry, Dominic Lee, we are concluding this item. Thank you, government officials. We now move on to the next agenda item. Fare increase applications from franchise bus operators. I'm going to invite government officials into the meeting room now. Members, please feel free to press the button if you would like to speak. I'd like to remind members that if you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest regarding the discussion item today, please declare the nature of such interest in accordance with the requirements under 83A of the Rules of Procedures. "19 members have pressed the button to request to speak. Let me do some calculation here. Members, given the number of members who would like to speak, I'll extend the meeting to 1:15 p.m. We'll invite representatives from the bus companies concerned as well as government officials to speak. 5 minutes for them to give their PPT presentation. From January to September last year, 5 franchise bus operators have submitted applications for increase in fares of the bus franchises. We have received and considered the applications, and we would like to take this opportunity to hear members' views. Bus services are related to the livelihood of the public, so we will take a prudent approach when we consider the applications, and will also act as gatekeeper to minimize the impact on passengers. We'll also ensure the financial stability and sustainability of the bus companies. We've received information about the bus companies' operation data and service performance, and we have submitted the relevant information to members for reference. Representatives from the bus companies will talk about their operation and service performance. Bus companies are crucial to the revival of the economy, so we urge bus companies to improve their services to enhance the service quality. In the papers, we also mentioned that we will, in accordance with established mechanism, prudently scrutinize the application. There are 6 factors that we take into consideration, including operating costs and revenue. These are all included in the paper. Maybe you don't have to repeat them. Also, to alleviate the burden of the public, the government has rolled out various measures. For instance, there is this franchise bus toll exemption fund. That is when the bus companies use the toll, the fare will be exempted and the money will be included in the fund. We also have the $2 scheme, that is the transport subsidy scheme. These are all efforts from the government side to alleviate the burden of the public. We're happy to listen to members' views today. Thank you, representatives from the administration. Now I will invite representatives from the bus companies to talk about their application. 5 minutes for each bus company. Mr. Roger Lee. All right. Mr. Joseph Leung from KMB. Chair and members. I'll talk about the fare increase applications of Longwin and KMB. During COVID, the patronage of the bus companies dropped by 10%. As the society resumes normal, the patronage still dropped by 10%. One of the reasons is the expansion of railway. Tuen Ma Line and the East Rail Line is the reason of the cause. And every day there was a drop of patronage of about 130,000 passengers. And the Northern Link and the Tuen Mun South Extension, as well as the Tung Chung Extension line, will also cause an impact on the drop of patronage. And fuel prices and operating costs were also of concern. Industries have been fighting for staff and talents, and so this will also contribute to the rise of operating costs. There has been a drop of international fuel prices, but there are still a number of uncertainties that we'll have to face. Traffic congestion also increases the length of bus journeys, and it also affects the commuters' behavior or concerns. Despite these challenges, Longwin and KMB have been putting in resources in different areas. We've set up the safety department to formulate safety policies. Last year, we set up the KMB Academy to provide training to maintenance staff and bus captains. And we also introduced the driver's feedback system as well as the rewarding system to help them improve their driving attitude. On service quality, we have added interchange bus stations as well as various concessions to passengers. We've also provided free 5G Wi-Fi services for passengers. Through our Club 1933 membership scheme, we allowed passengers to gain points and to get souvenirs or gifts. We have given out 15 million face masks. We have installed 30,000 solar panels to lower carbon emission. We've also actively experimented the use of electric buses. We hope that in the next 5 years we can increase the number of electric buses to 500, and by 2040 we will deploy new transport vehicles completely. And we also dedicate our efforts to helping the elderly people and ethnic minorities to help them integrate to the society. We will continue to devote resources into the above areas, but at the same time we also have to take into consideration financial sustainability. Fare box revenue is still our major source of income, so we have to apply for fare increase. We're applying for 9.5% of fare increase. It's about an increase of 70 cents for each bus trip. So it still does not offset the impact we are facing. We believe that actual impact imposed on passengers will be lower than 70%. For Longwen, the last fare increase was 7 years ago, and we're asking for an average of 90-cent fare increase. We have taken into consideration the affordability of passengers and the actual circumstances to make this application. We hope that the government can take into consideration our financial sustainability when they consider our application.
Thank you. May I now invite representatives from the New Lantau Bus Company Limited.
And honourable members, I'll open with a few words about NLB and who we are. NLB was established in 1973, incidentally celebrating our 50th birthday this year, and the company operates a highly diversified selection of franchised bus routes, including some of the most intensive urban routes and some of the most rural routes in Hong Kong, as well as some border routes and airport routes. With about 350 staff, the present size and shape of the company is about it's 23 million passengers last year, 132 licensed buses, and average age of about 8 years, and 27 routes. But the story has been clouded recently over the last 5 years by losses. So the company has been making losses for each of the past 5 years in succession. Nevertheless, we continue to be committed to service improvements and continuous improvements, and we've been doing a lot of good things, including we have the lowest lost trip rate in the industry, and we're committed to new routes as well, and we're looking at a new safety culture which we have embedded very successfully, nascent one, which is to good effect. And we're seeing that this is already seeing a reduction in our accident rate, quite considerable one. And as we move to the future, we have very good commitment to investment in new buses and innovation in digital mirrors, which will deal with the blind spots that we have seen so long causing problems. And we have the commitment to a new depot servicing site in Sunny Bay, and we're forever looking for ways to improve the value proposition for our customers, always looking for caring for our customers. You'll see lots of inspectors at our en route stops in Lantau, caring for customers, for making sure that the buses can stop and deal with those people. So as we go forward, we have seen investment in electric buses, doubling our fleet in the last 2 years, and we are committed to more zero-emission buses in future. But the key point why we want this fare increase is that we are needing to be sustainable and to have the funds to invest and carry on improving our services. And this fare increase that of 9.8% is something that is going to allow us to be able to do that as we go into the future and try to put this into a healthy, sustainable position financially so that we can continue to do all the good work that we want to do for the local community for many years to come. not just up to now, another 50 years in prospect. Thank you.
好，唔該。
Thank you very much. And then City Bus and NWF Bus Company.
It's an honour to be here today to present to you all. We are coming here today with a business that...
Sorry. Stop.
Sorry, Ms. Adam Leichman, please switch on your microphone.
Okay.
Yes, we have the PowerPoint, please. Ms. Leichman?
I was just saying it's an honour to be here today to present to you all. We have a business that is in need to fix some systemic problems that it has occurred over many years. A lot of the things that I've said before, we are doing similar things, we are facing similar problems, we won't rehash on that. But to go into our application, we have 3 contracts we're dealing with, the City Bus, F1 and New World First Bus, very similar operations in the city and Kowloon to the new territories. We have asked for a flat $2 increase to all fares on, in this service. We think that is the fairest way to distribute this increase across all of the users in Hong Kong. We'll touch on that a little bit. Secondly, we have the City Flyer and F2 contract, which services the airport and local areas around the airport. We have asked for a 50% increase on the A routes, which serve the airport, and a 23% increase on the balance. Washing out, that's about 1% per annum since 1998, when the last fare increase occurred. This business has not had a fare increase for 25 years. During that time, an egg has increased 200%. So we think it is reasonable to fix the situation we're currently in. But I would make special mention that we are increasing our discount that we are applying to local workers in the airport up to 54%. So there's a significant discount being given to local workers. In this presentation, we're going to quickly explain why we think we meet the requirements of the 6 factors that are used to assess fare increases by the government. And my colleagues, Stephen Winter and Richard Hall, are going to help explain this.
Okay. Please, Stephen.
Hello. Hi, Stephen.
Good morning, I'm Stephen. I'm pleased to be here to meet with you all. Now we'll switch back to the English channel.
This first slide is on the historical financial performance, which is one of the 6 factors. The table on the left shows each franchise's profit or loss. Our 3 franchises, shown at the bottom, have lost a cumulative of over 400 million for the 2 periods shown. The right shows a similar concept, but excluding the effect of government subsidies. You can see that for 2018 and 2019, the business was losing money at that time, and the message there is that we were losing money before the effects of the pandemic.
As was said before, there's been, over a number of years, a large increase in the costs to run this business. Fuel and labour in particular over 15 years have dramatically increased, and over this time our fares have only gone up 19%. So you can see there's a big lag between our fares and the costs of running this business.
Thank you.
Mr. Richard.
Thank you. Members, we'd like to draw your attention to some key variables between ourselves and the other franchise bus operators. These will justify the levels and the elements of the increases that we have explained to you today. Key events that have taken place on our network, the opening of the West Island Line, the South Island Line and East Rail Line last year, have seen a permanent reduction in patronage on our island network on Hong Kong Island. This has impacted for the long term on our business. All franchise bus operators have seen a reduction due to the pandemic that will be lasting in figures between 8 and 10%. In total, our network on Hong Kong Island has lost 34% of its patronage since 2014. I would also like to draw members' attention to some of the actions that we have taken. We are a more efficient business today. We have achieved over 4% scheduling efficiency savings since we have been in operation over the last 2 years. We're improving asset utilisation of our buses and fleet across the island to deliver best value going forward, taking internal actions to drive efficiencies, and delivering procurement strategies to deliver the best in value service provision. We are also happy in the future to be introducing an extensive customer loyalty programme, a new mobile application and a new website that will enhance passenger service information and make using the bus an easier and simpler task for all citizens across Hong Kong.
The slide relates to the SFAR formula. This formula takes into account wages, inflation, and productivity gains.
Time's up, please. I think all we got your PPT already.
Right.
Yeah. 好，
Then we move on to members' questions. Here is the order. They are Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, Mr. Scott Leung, Mr. Michael Tian, Mr. Gary Zhang, Stanley Lee, Michael Look, Chen Xiu Hong, Chen Hock Fong, Perry Yiu, Dominic Lee, Andrew Lam, Lee Jun Kang, Frankie Yik, Ambrose Lam, Kenneth Lau, Dennis Leung, Bill Tang, Chao Xiu Chung, Ben Chen. So altogether 4 minutes each for question and answer. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Or rather 3 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it should be 3 minutes. Chair, now the franchise bus companies are here today with us. It showed that they told us their operating environment. Now for KMB, in year 2020, they had a $120 million profit. And in year 2021, they had $100 million in profits after tax. But for other companies, they suffered a loss. For those franchise bus companies who are suffering a loss, they may think that it is the best time to introduce a price hike. But for the users and the passengers, it is the worst time. We've just begun on the path of recovery. The public and the SMEs are still struggling. This is the worst moment to introduce a price hike. As a Legislative Council member, I really find it difficult to support the idea. Yes, the patronage has dropped significantly during the epidemic and it caused operating difficulties. But shouldn't you wait longer and see how well you would recover after a few months or half a year before proposing a price hike? You give us all the figures recorded during the pandemic. Well, what about the public? Can an employee ask the employer to compensate them for the loss they suffered during the pandemic? What about the SMEs? They would be lucky to be still alive. So I think it is a very unfortunate moment to introduce this price hike. The perception would really be very bad. It would be really hard to stomach. Say, for example, airport bus routes. During the pandemic, we all know that the patronage of airports has dropped by 90%. But now we are recovering. We have begun to recover. So my point is, the government should sit and wait for at least half a year to see how the recovery is progressing. It may be easier to explain the price hike to the public. Well, we understand you are a businessman. You have to consider your earning, profits, and cash flow, but this is not a good time. And you talk about improvements in your service. Of course, we support those. But you have the franchise, and it comes naturally that you have to improve your service, and those are not good reasons for a price hike. I think 4 minutes would be fine. The administration can give you a reply. Thank you, Dr. Lo, for your views. As we said, we are currently handling the applications. We will consider a number of factors. Of course, the public's affordability is also one factor to be considered. and also the past operating situation and the forecast of future cost, revenue, and return will also be taken into account. So Dr. Low asked whether the situation would improve after the resumption of travel. Well, that would also be part of our assessment. And also, we would consider when the price change would be implemented. Thank you.
啦，連問連
4 minutes question and answers included. Mr. Scott Leung. Thank you, Chair. I believe we can all feel the anger of the public with these fare increase applications. That's why the government made a press release to saying that you'll act as the gatekeeper. I believe you all understand that the bus companies cannot apply for excessively high fare increase. I think the administration has to make it clear whether you would consider rejecting their applications. Well, now that COVID has subsided, the society has gradually resumed to normal. Nevertheless, the bus companies are applying for fare increase. I hope that the bus companies should be aware that all sectors in Hong Kong have been working hard to try to resume normal. I think the administration should really act as the gatekeeper here, because bus services are crucial to the livelihood of the public. The fare increase will definitely have an impact on the public. Some families may have to spend $2,000 to $3,000 every month to take buses. With this fare increase, it is a huge impact on their livelihood. I hope that the administration should act as the gatekeeper. Also, when we look at fare increase applications, we also have to take into account the supporting services provided by bus companies. In my community, from 2018 to 2023, relevant stakeholders have been asking for the bus services they want, but then the bus company could not fulfill what they need. Is that what you call quality services? What is the role of the administration here? It took bus companies so long, or 5 years' time, to build the bus stop shelters. Of course, there were complaints. I think the administration should really allow some time to make observation on the financial position of the bus companies to make a decision on the fare increase applications. But at this moment, I think the administration should wait. As mentioned, the administration will serve as the gatekeeper here. When we consider the applications, on one hand, we have to consider the public's acceptability as the society gradually resumes normal. On the other hand, we have to strike a balance and look at the financial sustainability of the bus companies, because it is related to whether the bus company are able to provide sustainable services to the public. So we have to consider a host of various factors and take a balanced approach. Please be rest assured that we will act as the gatekeeper here. Next, Mr. Michael Teen. 2 years ago, 2 bus companies applied for fare increase, and they're making applications again. And in the meantime, the inflation rate in Hong Kong is 3.7%. KMB is now asking for a 9.5% fare increase, and it is 2.5 times of the inflation rate. And the New World Bus is asking for a $2 flat rate increase, and it is an increase of 25%. That is 7 times of the inflation rate. It really triggers the anger of the whole society. I try to look at this from a different angle. Over the past 15 years, from 2028 to 2022, the accumulated inflation rate is 41.5%, with the KMB application for fare increase of 9.5%. The actual increase that accumulated is about 35%, which is a bit lower than the accumulated inflation rate. New World Bus and City Bus is asking for 25% of increase, and it is 20% higher than the inflation rate. Are the bus companies being outrageous here? Or is the truth that there isn't a fare adjustment mechanism like the MTRC does? And that's why every time there is a fare increase, it is a significant increase. We all know that bus companies are facing such hardship because of the expansion of railway projects by MTRC. The East Railway line and also the Tuen Mun South extension lines are also causes of their difficulties. If the fare adjustment mechanism of bus companies fall behind of the actual circumstances, I believe the problem will persist. Over the past 25 years, the operators of New World Bus and City Bus have changed 3 times. I hope the administration will review the overall situation. Perhaps you can approve a small fare increase to allow the bus companies to continue to survive if they've been suffering a loss. I hope that you'll consider one point. With the fierce competition, I hope there is a fare adjustment mechanism every year that is linked to the inflation rate. Perhaps you can subsidize them with the dividends of shares from MTRC. If you think that they do not need the subsidies, then don't subsidize them. Don't allow them to keep making fare increase applications from time to time here. I'm interested in knowing what plans the administration has to tackle the long-term problems. Please leave the administration some time to respond to your questions. Let me give a brief response. In our paper, we mentioned that the current fare adjustment mechanism takes into consideration various factors. We have to consider different factors, including the operation of the bus companies as well as the acceptability of the public. Mr. Michael Tin mentioned whether the fare adjustment rate can be pegged with the inflation rate. I think we need to think about this. Under the current fare adjustment mechanism, different factors have to be taken into account. If we use inflation rate as the indicator to calculate the fare adjustment rate, the bus companies may not be able to effectively cope with the rise of operation costs such as fuel costs and salary. So we have to be prudent about this. Sorry, Michael Tin, you left the administration very little time to respond. Next, Mr. Stanley Lee. Of course, the bus companies have to take into consideration the operation cost when they make such applications. But don't forget that there are other important considerations, that is the public acceptability and affordability, as well as the quality and quantity of service provided by bus companies. A lot of citizens have told us or expressed that this fare increase is unacceptable. Buses is one of an important means of commuting for grassroots workers. So they will suffer with the fare increase. Well, the bus companies have been suffering losses, but how much is it related to the operation issues on the company's part? Have you also thought about the service quality perceived by the public? If you look at the performance data, passengers in general have expressed dissatisfaction on the service frequency. In 2013, the lost trip rate was 2.6%. Over the past 3 years, the figure is 6.3, 2.8, and 2.4%, respectively. So there has been no improvement. And you are just transferring the operation costs onto the passengers. Is it fair to the public? I see that the bus companies have respectively made their applications in January, June, and September last year. Do the figures here correctly reflect the financial situation of the bus companies? Have you discussed with bus companies to see if the fare increase would be acceptable by the public, or are you simply submitting the proposals to the LegCo without making considerations on your part beforehand? Ms. Lee? As mentioned, we're taking this opportunity for the bus companies to explain why the fare increase is justified. Well, we don't have a conclusion yet. We're not saying that we're going to approve the applications right away. We will act as the gatekeeper and will look at the relevant statistics and figures to see if the application or fare increase is justifiable. After the last fare increase, we've been liaising with the bus companies and asked for relevant data. We also take into account the resumption to normalcy in the society when we make the assessments on the applications. So we haven't had a conclusion yet on the fare increase applications. We will continue to make assessments and continue to serve as the gatekeeper here. Next, Mr. Stanley Lee. I think the fare increase that they are asking for are outrageous. The cost of living of the public has been high, and this will have a significant impact on them. So the citizens have been facing hardship, the bus companies as well. As a representative of the community, I have to speak on behalf of the public. I understand that the administration will continue to take into account of the public acceptability. However, it is obvious that this fare increase is unacceptable to the public. I don't think much discussion is needed to come to the conclusion that this fare increase is unreasonable. However, I do think that we have to think about how we can offer assistance to the bus companies. We mentioned earlier on that during COVID, a lot of cross-boundary passenger coaches have been left idle and parked on the roads. So with such challenges, I wonder if the administration can offer more assistance to the bus companies instead of accepting their applications to raise the fare increase. Can we help them to not simply rely on non-fare box revenue? A lot of times, administration takes a long time to approve the new bus routes. With the commissioning of the new Cheng Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel, the administration has been taking a long time to approve new bus routes. We all know that with the commissioning of the tunnel, we'll be able to attract more passengers through these bus new routes. So can the government do something on its part to offer support to the bus companies instead of imposing the fare increase on the public? I understand why the 5 franchise bus operators are asking for fare increase, but as mentioned, both the public and the bus companies have been facing hardships. So the administration has to do something to help them cope with the challenges. Are there any measures that can be rolled out by the government to help them operate their bus services more smoothly?
Thank you. Now, we appreciate that bus companies have been doing very poorly in the balance sheet over the past few years. The government has offered different measures to help them. During the epidemic, through numerous rounds of anti-epidemic fund, a total of $2.4 billion were offered to bus companies. In year 2019, we have established the franchised bus toll exemption fund. Now, the toll saved by the bus companies would be injected into this fund. So in the event of a price increase, the fund can be used to partially offset the increase to alleviate the burden on the public. And there are different measures to help bus companies to increase their non-fare box revenue. We have discussion with the companies on how they can generate revenue from, or advertisements revenue from their light boxes. Thank you. Mr. Michael Look. Thank you. Right off the bat, I would like the chairman to accede to the proposal from me and Mr. Bill Tang. We should have an extra meeting to discuss this issue of bus fare increase, which is closely related to public livelihood. You only gave us these proposals on the 14th. There is no time for us to move a motion, and there isn't sufficient time for the public to discuss the matter. We didn't have much time to read the paper. We only have 1 hour for discussing this item, and we have 3 important items today. I think the chairman has a very tough job today. We don't mind having more meetings. We can help reduce the fare increase ask, or we can help the bus companies to improve their operation. We can have more meetings to do that. Now, you talk about non-fare box revenue, including revenue from advertisements or sales which are not included on the balance sheet, or if these operations are outsourced, they may not be included in the bus company's account. So my question is whether there are revenue non-accounted for in the balance sheet. Now, there are revenue from redeveloping bus depots. No tendering was required. The bus companies made a profit from the land sale, but it was not accounted for in the balance sheet. So what about these? Now we have a vicious cycle. Now if you have a price hike, then we have fewer passengers, so you have to reduce the fare again, and then the number would increase, and then you have to ask for a price again. This is a very bad spiral. Can the government establish a flexible mechanism to support bus companies to look for non-fare box revenues, say for example running a convenience store near the bus stops or something like that? Now, if you look at Singapore, they have a contract model. The government would design the bus routes, and the bus companies would be responsible for deciding the fare, and then it would be put up for tender. So the government would be the one purchasing services from the bus companies. The revenue would go to the government, and the bus company or the bus operators would be guaranteed a stable income stream. So can the government consider this model to help both the bus companies and the public administration? Thank you. On the first point of non-fare box revenue, whether they were accounted for in the account, according to the Public Bus Services Ordinance, It stipulates that the operating revenue of bus companies must include revenue from advertisement. So in short, they are accounted for. Second, whether we can do more to help them generate fringe revenue or non-fare box revenue. Well, the government always keeps an open mind, and we welcome proposals from the bus companies, and we would do our best to help. We have seen many successful cases in the past where bus companies could generate non-fare box revenue from their bus stops. In terms of changing the service model, as mentioned by Mr. Michael Look, we have no intention to change it at this juncture. It would involve a large amount of public money, and it may also weaken the incentive for bus companies to improve their service on a sustainable term. Mr. Chen Shihong, thank you. All 5 bus companies have submitted outrageous asks for price hikes. We don't have sufficient information at hand, so we rely on the government to be the gatekeeper. In assessing these proposals, a number of factors will be considered, including the change in operating costs and revenue since the last fare adjustment. Now, my question is, under the epidemic, the 5 companies have received a number of few subsidies on regular maintenance and one-off non-accountable subsidies and so on during the pandemic under the AEFs. So have the accounts we were shown included these subsidies? We want to know the real picture of operation. Now, last month we have received 1.46 million tourists. It is the first time that the tourist number in 1 month exceeded 1 million over the past 3 years. So besides the data provided by the bus companies, has the government assessed the resumption of travel, the impact on the bus companies' operation? We have to consider different scenarios, that is the maximum patronage, minimum patronage, and so on. Well, if the patronage is expected to increase, there must be a room for the fare to decrease in the future. Now we have a subsidy that one-third subsidy for public transport costs paid by the public exceeding $200. So if the government accedes to the proposals, can the government give us the expected increase in public expenditure under different scenarios? Now I see that non-fare box revenue accounts for a small amount in all 5 bus companies, and it didn't help much in terms of the revenue. The government said it would keep an open mind in helping the bus companies get more non-fare box revenue. So has there been any scenarios when proposals from the bus companies were rejected by the government? I think the bus companies should be more proactive in terms of increasing the non-fare box revenue to alleviate the pressure. So does any representative from the bus companies would like to reply to this question? Mr. Lee? Now, concerning the revenue or the profits, the government subsidies were included. As mentioned in our PowerPoint, we expect a population decline because we have an aging population. The prospects of economic growth is weak, so there would be less incentive for commuting. Now, the major cause is the MTR. Now, the Tuen Ma line has commissioned plus the Sha-Tin Central rail link, we're talking about 130,000 passengers taken away from us. So that would be equal to 2.8 million trips. We have been communicating with the government on the proposal to establish our own convenience store near bus stops. The government has been very accommodating to our proposal, so it may improve the non-fare box revenue in the future. Mr. Chen Hock-Fong. Now, concerning the fare increase proposal, we are all astonished, especially when this application has been made at the height of the fifth wave. So, of course, the figure would be very ugly. So what about the post-epidemic situation? Can you give us the most updated data? Don't just give us the worst picture. What about now? And you said non-fare box revenue is included. Well, but according to my memory, for tram operators and ferry operators, the non-fare box revenue accounted for 30 or even 40% of their revenue. Why is this so little for you bus companies? Are you hiding something from us? Or is it the case that you are not making enough efforts to increase your non-fare box revenue? Now, the NWFS and the City Bus there was a merger. So you said the fare mechanism is now more flexible. But now the ask from NWFS and City Bus are outrageous. Just simply tell us if you want to stop running the bus routes. Don't give us these outrageous asks. Now, for some routes, the increase is as much as 40%. For Airbus, it is 50%. It is equivalent to $70. So why would you choose you? Why would I choose you? Just tell me if you want to give up. So how can the transport department hold them accountable? Well, I agree we should give them help because of the epidemic and the wider MTR service. But we should help them in the form of helping them consolidate their bus routes. Now, we use the MTR as the main means of transport and bus routes as support. So the TD should help bus companies redesign or consolidate their bus routes. That would be more effective. Under Secretary, we have always encouraged bus companies to cut costs and open revenue streams via different methods. Say, for example, enhancing efficiency or creating non-fare box revenue. So some members questioned the low percentage of non-fare box revenue in bus companies' balance sheet. Well, compared with ferries and tram, the fare box revenue of bus companies is much higher. So the base figure is much bigger. As a result, the percentage would be smaller, but we will work with the bus companies to improve it. Mr. Perry Yu. Thank you, Chair. Concerning the application for fare increase, well, I thought I misread it. Paragraph 13. Well, it says the increase on Airbus service will be increased by 50%. Well, I was stunned. Or is it the fact that the original fare is very cheap, like that of ferry? No, it costs $40 at present. If you take an Airbus from Adelaide Chow to the airport, $48, a 50% increase would bring us to $72. Well, if I want to go to the airport for travel, why don't we carpool and take a taxi? The worst implication would be on those who work in the airports. So I wonder, having received these applications, What does the government think? This figure is simply outrageous and unacceptable. At least give us some reasonable figures. We understand that under the epidemic, every sector is struggling, bus companies included. An appropriate fare increase would help bus companies' sustainable operation. We understand that, but we simply cannot accept the ask now, especially for Airbus service. We have a serious manpower shortage at the airports right now. If the transportation cost is so huge right now, how can we hire more staff to work at the airport? The major consideration for working at the airport is the transportation cost. We want our airports to resume to full service as soon as possible. You can see how fragile the system is from the incident yesterday. There is a manpower shortage, and there are lots of new recruits who are not experienced in dealing with accidents. So, particularly on the issue of airports, can the government think of something to help consolidate the resilience of airports operation? I know it is unrelated to the fare increase, but can you offer some targeted subsidy to employees working at the airport? Or can you ask the bus companies to offer more concessions or discounts to workers working at the airport? There are no details on the paper. Thank you.
委书长。
Deputy Secretary. We're now assessing the applications made by the bus companies. As mentioned, we will take into consideration the public acceptability and affordability. We understand that a lot of airport workers will rely on Airbus services for commuting, and the fare increase will create an impact on them, and we will take this into consideration. If the administration does not agree with the fare increase or is of the view that the fare increase is not reasonable, we may reject the application. On Airbus services, I understand that there are some discount offered to airport workers. Perhaps we can invite the representatives from bus companies to talk about it. Sorry, we're out of time. Mr. Dominic Lee. I think we're all angry about the fare increase applications over the past 3 years, especially with black-clad violence. A lot of grassroots workers have suffered from the impact of what happened in the society. Now we are resuming to normalcy, and the economy is beginning to revive, that the bus companies are asking for fare increase. Well, the citizens were going through the hardship with bus companies, but the bus companies are not doing the same with us. KMB is asking for a 9.5% fare increase, and last time they made the application was 2021. In less than 2 years' time, they are asking for a fare increase again. Is it reasonable? As Mr. Perry said, there will be a 50% increase on Airbus services. This will be a huge impact on airport workers, as they have to spend several $100s more or even $1,000 more every month on taking buses. If you allow them to increase this fare, you're pushing them to a more serious hardship, because people might as well take taxis instead with the fare increase. I think that the administration needs to really act as the gatekeeper here. I understand that the $2 discount is a benefit to the public. But we're concerned about this discount because it is actually indirectly helping bus companies to boost their businesses. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is about how the government is using the public funds. I wonder if the Transport Department will implement a mechanism to monitor the operation of bus companies. We're asking often the bus companies to add new bus routes, but they often reject to do so. So I wonder if the administration is going to do something to monitor the operation of the bus companies. Ms. Lee. Perhaps we can ask representatives from the bus companies to tell us about the justifications behind the fare increase applications. In 2021, when we asked for a fare increase, it should be backdated to 2018, and the application from 2018 was made 4 years ago, and we asked for 8.5% of fare increase in 2021. After deducting the toll exemption fund, the actual fare increase we applied for was about 5%.
With our application for our city bus services, this is the first application in 25 years. And for the F1 and New World First bus, this is the third application in 15 years. So there's been a big lag between the costs in this business and inflation and our fare increases. So I understand the sentiment, but there is real justification for why we're needing to put this in at the moment to get the business back to a financially healthy situation. And I would also make the point that we're not doing this just on the back of COVID at all. We're trying to make the point that this is a systemic problem with cost inflations and the loss of passengers over an extended period of time. So we're trying to bring this business back to the healthy situation it needs to allow investment.
OK，唔該。林筱魯議員。
Mr. Andrew Lam. I appreciate that there are huge hardship being faced by the bus companies. However, I also take into consideration the fare adjustment mechanism and public acceptability and affordability. As a matter of fact, I really do not think how it is justifiable for you to apply for such a huge fare increase. I think there is a structural problem to be tackled. Moving forward, we have to promote new transport or new energy. We also will see demographic changes. How are we going to tackle these issues? With these systemic and structural problems, does the administration have any new ideas? The existing policies will continue to be implemented. I understand this, but do you have any new policies or ideas to tackle the new problems that we're facing? Deputy Secretary. As mentioned, apart from fare revenue, we have been encouraging and working with the bus companies to see how we can cut costs and expand revenue so that they do not have to impose such a huge fare increase. We set up the franchised bus toll exemption fund for the same purpose, so that the toll saved can be used to offset the increase in operation costs and also to help alleviate the burden of the public. So the administration will continue to act as the gatekeeper and take into consideration the public acceptability. We have rolled out various transport subsidy schemes to offer help to the public. Chair, I emphasized new policies or new ideas. It's because no matter how effective the existing policies are, we have to take into account of the business performances of the bus companies. The existing policies are not helping the bus companies to boost their businesses. That's the truth. So are you going to come up with new policies? Or are you going to continue to allow bus companies to come up with their own ways to tackle the problems? I hope that the administration can think about this proactively. Thanks for the suggestions, Mr. Lee Chen-kung. Oh, sorry, Mr. Frankie Yik. I have the following observations regarding the fare increase applications. I have in various occasions expressed my views that the bus companies have been facing hardships in running their businesses. With the development of railway, it takes away passengers from the bus companies. MTRC passengers account for 40% of all the passengers in Hong Kong. MTRC got financial assistance, but other transport companies are not getting the same assistance. And with the increase of fuel costs and maintenance and repair costs, as the drop of patronage, it is obvious that the bus companies are having a hard time. We're unable to see the complete account of the businesses of the bus companies, so it's hard for us to make a judgment here. I think that we should not only look at the changes in parameters since the last fare increase, we should perhaps look at the median monthly household income as well as the inflation rate accumulated over the past 15 years to make a decision. Using Citybus as an example, they did not apply for a fare increase over the past 25 years. 50% may be a high fare increase, but we have to take into consideration the median monthly household income as well. Also, about 40 to 50% of discount has been offered to airport workers. As Mr. Andrew Lam said, we should think about why Citybus has not been able to increase their fare over the 25 years. That's why they're making this outrageous application now. If you look at government's paper, it says that the need to provide the bus operator with a reasonable rate of return is one of the factors that the administration takes into consideration when they assess the applications. Does that mean if the public is unable to afford it, then you will reject the applications? Obviously, this is not one of the options. Are you going to continue to use the current transport subsidy scheme to help alleviate the public's burden? If that's the case, where will the money come from? I think the government should set up a stabilization fund and help the bus companies to make continuous investments to boost their businesses and sustain their businesses. Also, they should take into consideration the welfare of the bus drivers and their staff. That would be a win-win situation. I think there is a need for bus companies to adjust their fares. And I believe that even with the fare increase applications approved, they will not make profit completely.
Deputy Secretary, thank you. Mr. Frankie Yik is right. We have mentioned that we would take into account those considerations in the formula. Now, the government would be the gatekeeper to strike a balance between all the factors. We understand the public's concern, and at the same time, we understand the bus companies' need to have a sound financial condition in order to offer a great service to our people. So these factors will be considered by us as a whole. Mr. Lee Jiankang, thank you. Now, the most peculiar thing about this proposal is that some bus companies are asking for a flat fare raise of $2. Now, looking at the information, there is a lower cap for fare increase for island routes. Now, for every kilometers traveled, the charge may be even lower than other means of public transport. So maybe the government has to think about standardizing the charge. Now, many bus companies are relying on cross-harbor routes. For short trip routes, it is bound to suffer a loss, especially with the increasing wage and fuel cost. So long trips would be used for compensating for the short trips. So it is unfair for residents living in New Territories Northwest. So it is an unfair mechanism. There are so many things for the government to ponder over. So what about the long-term transport strategy? Can the government ensure that there is living space for bus companies? Well, I am in doubt. I don't see any bright future for bus companies given the existing plan. Not to mention, give us good service. So you can only open up new revenue streams and cut costs. You don't want to cut costs because we want to save jobs. So there is the only option. The only option would be to increase revenue. So can you allow buses to use LED display panels to display advertisements like the buses in London? And can you allow bus companies to use their at-grade premises for commercial purpose to increase revenue? Now, for busier public transport interchange like the City Square and so on, when situation allows, land should be offered for bus companies to open, say, cafes or convenience stores to increase their non-fare box revenue while serving the customers. And also, the public transport interchanges can be outsourced for management by private contractors or bus companies, so that more billboards can be put up. So these are already available for some public transport means, and the MTRC is being subsidized in the form of land. So why can't we give bus companies more help? Deputy Secretary, yes, concerning proposals to increase non-fare box revenue, we have been working closely with the bus companies to that end, on the premise that safe and efficient operation is not undermined. So how long have you been considering that? How long do you need to consider that? Well, for proposals from bus companies to use their buses for advertisement, well, I need a KPI, 3 months, half a year. That is an ongoing effort. Well, I don't see any result. Well, in the past, we did have some successful cases, and we are at present handling different applications. On the flat fare increase of $2, can we invite the bus companies to... Sorry, we have a very tight schedule. Mr. Ambrose Lam, Chair, I want to remind those younger council members here whether they have to declare interest. Well, Mr. Chen Shu-hong and Mr. Chen Hop-fong covered my points already, but I want to highlight how much we are concerned about the situation, so I would like to repeat my points. So one factor to consider is the changes in operating costs and revenue since the last fare adjustments and the forecast of future cost, revenue, and return. The paper is insufficient in terms of the data given. Now, we don't have the 2022 annual report yet. So can we wait until the 2022 financial statement is ready before we decide on whether a fare increase should be given? Now, according to the stock 0062, that is Longwind's annual report, in year 2020, the revenue was $600 million, and the annual profits was from some $400 million. Now, with the government subsidy, the revenue shot up to $1.9 billion. The company was even able to distribute bonus to the shareholders. Now, all the money has gone into the shareholders' pocket, and now you are coming to us and ask for a fare increase. Now, for the other two bus companies, since the fare increase in years 2017 and 19, that is KMB and the other bus company, before the fare increase, they were making a profit. And then when there was a fare increase, they suffer a loss. Maybe it is the way to increase patronage. Now, wage cost in year 2016, it was $640 million. In year 2018, it was $840 million. So are the frontline employees getting less pay rise than the management? Now, can we invite the bus companies to reply? What about NWSB? First bus, Richard, or Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chair. A very quick response. Two major factors driving up pay is the need to recruit labour and the labour shortage in Hong Kong, which is an increasing factor, has been in place for over 10 years. The other key thing is changes to the regulations around the operations of our bus networks and how we schedule our bus captains. That increased labour costs substantially, and it impacted on our profitability and outturn numbers. So it actually decreased the earnings we were receiving. So that was regulations that were changed by the government that impacted our businesses going forward.
OK， 唔該。跟住梁祖德。
Thank you, Mr. Leung. Thank you, Chair. In year 2020, we received help from the government. That's why we had a after-tax profits. And also the profit wasn't submitted to the parent company. We kept the revenue for future investment. In year 2022, on the first half of the year, we suffered a loss as a whole. So that's all. Mr. Ambrose Lam, any follow-up question? Well, they didn't explain whether the management received a fat pay, but not the frontline staff. NWFB, Mr. Richard Hall.
Thank you, Chair, for the answer. Actually, we increased our headline rate of 4.5% for our staff last year. Our staff are key critical in the future of all of our businesses. Without staff, we can't run our businesses, we can't generate revenues, and we can't generate incomes. And, you know, they are the driver in pushing up costs increases so we can reward and retain staff into the future.
都係冇乜答案。
So still not much of an answer. Mr. Kenneth Lau. Thank you. Concerning the fare increase proposals raised by the 5 bus companies, I am concerned. Now, this is a very big ask. And for some bus companies, it is the second time for a fare increase application. And there are a lot of debate about the issue, and also Citybus is asking for a flat increase of $2 and a 50% raise for Airbus. Now, for the Route 5X, it is $5.4, so it would become $7.40 in the future. So it is a 40% increase. Now, of course, it would affect the workers working at the airports. Airbus service will get a 50% increase, which seems that it is very off-putting for tourists. Now we have the epidemic and we have fuel costs hike and increasing labor costs. It would add to the operating pressure. However, if we are transferring the burden onto the public, we have to think about how to alleviate the impact. Say, for example, cutting costs and creating new revenue streams. So I would like to listen to the NWFB and the City Bus. So we had a few meetings before the merger. So we have to look at the long-term operation. We have to be sustainable so as to offer quality service to the people. I accept that. But before the merger, I think you had already expected difficult operating environments in the near future. And you understand that a fare increase would be a burden on the residents. So I would like to listen to the new operators on the view on this. So, Mr. Adam Leishman.
Yes, there have been difficult times for the business, absolutely. Historically and also during COVID, it's been a very tough time. We have made a lot of changes within the business to try to make it more efficient. Richard's touched on some of those earlier. We have made special attention, and to Richard's point earlier, to look after our staff during this time. They're number one in our business. So, 5,000 people work for us and their families depend on it, and we've had them an absolute priority to look after them. We made no frontline people redundant during COVID, and we made that investment into people. Within the business, we're trying to make a lot of efficiencies to help reduce the burden, but as I've said before, we have a systemic problem to fix. And it doesn't matter who is sitting here, this business is not in a good shape, and COVID was difficult, but actually it was already not in a good shape. And so we're trying to fix that now. And we're very much wanting to invest in the future. We feel an absolute privilege to be running this service. Hong Kong has one of the best bus systems in the world, but we need to get the business back into a healthy situation so we can invest in the future, in new facilities, in our staff, and in our customers. Thank you.
OK，有冇追問？
政府有冇
Any follow-up question? Any reply from the administration? So when approval was given to this company to take on a merger with NWFB and City Bus, it is a mid to long-term investment project. And given the difficult time, maybe we should give people some breathing space and make a profit a few years down the road. With the merger, there will be synergy effects in the middle to long run, which would be beneficial to the operation of the bus companies. These are considerations we will take into account as well. We will be the gatekeeper. Next, Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chair. Well, after so much struggle, we have finally come through the epidemic. We hope the government can offer more supportive measures for the economy. In the budget published just now, a number of measures have been announced to boost the economy and for supporting different industries. For example, Happy Hong Kong. It is all in the hope to help Hong Kong on the path of return to normalcy. Now, before we actually achieve that, this is the first road bump we hit, fare increase. Over the past few years, employees were given no pay leave, and they were relying on their savings. There was no increase in wages or a very meager increase. Inflation is very bad. So this fare increase proposal will really discourage workers from joining the workforce. In the past, many people already make their job decision based on location because of prohibitive transportation costs. Many people choose to stay in their own neighborhood to work. So one reason behind the shortage of labor is the high transportation cost. Now with this looming fare increase, those people originally working in the airports may choose to change jobs. It would affect the development of our aviation industry and the tourism industry. It is a long-standing problem, even before the pandemic. So is there any help from the government for the bus companies to cut costs and increase revenue? If we look at the formula the bus companies adopt, the increase is generally 2.31%. So will the government recommend a lower fare increase under the formula so that the public can accept the fare increase and increase employment and help employers hire more employees? Thank you.
Either.
Ms. Lee? We fully appreciate that during COVID, the public had been having a hard time. On transportation cost, the government has rolled out various measures to try to alleviate the financial burden. We have the $2 scheme, and $1.1 billion were spent on this scheme last year. For the public transport subsidy scheme, in the budget that has just been announced, it suggested that the scheme will extend to this October. The administration over the past year spent some $3 billion on these measures. So the government really strives to lessen the financial burden of the public. Members mentioned that there is a huge fare increase on the Airbus services. Well, the administration is currently assessing the applications, and we will continue to act as the gatekeeper. But what I would like to say is that airport workers have been enjoying bus fare discounts when commuting to work. Mr. Bill Tang. This is a shocking and negative news for the public. Members who are familiar with business operations have questions and doubts about the fare increase applications. I hope the administration can really act as the gatekeeper here. The bus company is asking for a 50% fare increase. And now the proposal is submitted to the LegCo. But before you submit the proposal, did you talk to the bus companies so that we're not scared or taken by surprise by the figures? Don't tell me that they have not applied for fare increase for a long time. I've been a district councillor in the outlying islands district for 12 years, so I'm very familiar with the operation situation of the bus company. When you say that there is need for bus companies to ask for fare increase, it means that they are suffering losses. Over the past 20 years, Citybus has been doing quite well. I'm saying this because from 2019 to 2020, they made $5.9 million of profit. And the calculation was made for the period of 1st of July 2019 to the 30th of June 2020. And then in the following 1.5 5 years, they suffered a loss of $150 million. I believe the bus company will gain profit again as the society resumes normal. So is it necessary for you to ask for a 50% fare increase? Do all airport workers have the octopus card to enjoy the discount? A lot of subcontractor workers are working at the airport and they do not have the restricted zone permit or closed area permit. Also, the most expensive fare for 8 routes is $58, and now it will be increased to $87. And even with a half price discount, it will also cost them some $40 for the bus fare. I do not just want to pick on city bus, but bus services are critical to the public. We cannot let city bus make such a huge impact on Hong Kong and distort the economy this way. One of the corporations is a major shareholder of the mainland bus manufacturer. Does the government have the power to monitor the situation to see if the bus companies are spending too much on procuring buses? Deputy Secretary. As mentioned, we're taking this opportunity to listen to members' views on the fare increase applications made by the bus operators so that the bus companies can collect more information, and we can also collect more information to help us assess the applications. On bus procurement, I'll ask my colleagues from the Transport Department to supplement. Ms. Amy Che. Thank you, Chair. On bus procurement, when bus companies procure buses, they have to inform us. And based on their needs, we'll make an assessment as to what kind of buses and which manufacturers they turn to. They have to fulfill or meet the requirements of their boards, and these are all legislated under the current law. Mr. Chao Xiu-chung, just when the society has just begun to resume normal, we are seeing these huge fare increase applications. It's like pouring cold water on our heads. This is way out of the affordability of the public. I think the only party that is happy to see the fare increase applications would be MTRC. We understand that the bus companies have been facing hardship in terms of their operation. I wonder if we can make use of the dividends received by the administration through MTRC to set up an operation fund to help the bus companies so that we don't have to impose the costs on the public. We also have to think about how we can expand non-fare box revenue for the bus companies or help them rationalize bus routes. I hope that the administration can stand firm in this regard and act as a gatekeeper for the public. I would like to, in particular, pinpoint the fare increase application made by New World First Bus and City Bus. It is mentioned in the paper that for City Bus F2 has not made a fare increase since mid-1997. We have now 30 Airbus routes, but back in 1997 there were only 13. Longwind also provide Airbus services. They also increase their fare, but the cap that you allow is still lower than the fare we saw in 1997. The truth is that when they fixed the price back then, it was already quite expensive. Some workers told me that a single journey costs about $52. After fare increase, it will be $78. It will be over $4,000 per month for the workers. How are they going to afford the fares? We are seeing the implementation of the 3-runway system. We'll have 140,000 workers to work on this project. With the fare increase for the Airbus services, some $4,000 to $5,000 per month, how are you going to attract workers to work on this project? Would they be willing to travel all the way to Chap Lapcock? Not to mention recruiting new staff. The existing staff may resign too. With the fare increase, can you guarantee that the fares for airport workers will remain unchanged? Deputy Secretary, we've heard members' views and we will take these into consideration when we assess the applications. I'd like to invite New World First Bus and City Bus to make a response on the fare increase on its Airbus services. Mr. Adam Leishman or Mr. Richard Hall? Yes, Mr. Richard Hall.
The point is on Airbus services, fares haven't increased for 25 years for the franchise term. What we are asking for is this increase to reset the mechanism. And the mechanism is clearly defined in ordinance. The SFAR mechanism that you can see displayed on the screen in front of you allows for affordable and regular fare increases to all franchise bus operators. All franchise bus operators believe if that SFAR formula that is ordained in ordinance is applied on an annual, regular basis, we would not be coming to the LegCo and the government and asking for these increases now. Thank you, Chair.
好啊，最後係我啦。嗱，我借用巴士阿叔有句説話。
Well, everyone is under pressure, including the bus companies and the public. If you are increasing the bus fare by 50%, I think it's a bit crazy of you to do so despite the fact that you have not made the fare increase for the past decades. I hope the administration can impose some sort of guidelines to the bus companies in terms of allowing them to make such fare increase applications so that the public will not be taken by surprise by the figures. Otherwise, it will give the public the impression that they can make such fare increase applications in an arbitrary manner. I hope that the administration can really talk to the bus companies and review all over again how you can propose a reasonable and acceptable fare increase to the public. On the other hand, I understand that bus companies have been facing certain pressure in terms of their operations. Some members proposed expanding non-fare box revenues. For bus companies, they have to make applications if they want to make non-fare box revenue. Usually, this kind of applications take a long time to be approved. I hope that with the difficult operating environment, the Transport Department can roll out some sort of policies, or the TLB can roll out some sort of policies to set a target in the future. For instance, setting a 15 to 20% target for non-fare box revenue, or subsidize the bus companies to expand the non-fare box revenue to encourage their applications in this regard. Also, you may ask bus companies to see what kind of businesses they would like to run, and you offer your support as best as you can. it would be meaningless or pointless if it takes you 2 years to approve an application, say, to run a supermarket by the bus companies. I want to ask if TLB can roll out such kind of policy. Thank you.
同事會
I will invite my colleagues from the Transport Department to give a reply. Ms. Amy Chair, thank you. We have been considering the application for non-fare box operation, for example, a mask dispenser. Well, how long did it take? Well, it was not very long. Usually the locations we're talking about would be bus stops or public transport interchange. So we have to consider whether the operation would affect the pedestrian flow and the queues. And sometimes it involves lands departments and other departments. But for those within our control, we would approve it very swiftly. Of course, you would adopt the established mechanism to go through the process, say, for example, TPB and so on. But I think the Transport and Logistics Bureau can issue a set of policy to make sure that the application will be dealt with as quickly as possible by other departments. I hope you can take this message back with you, because this is our concern, and the KPI should be set. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, the last item, any other business. Members, please note that the subcommittee on matters relating to railways under this panel, its work period will expire in May this year. According to House Rules 26(c), a subcommittee should complete its work within 12 months of its commencement and report to the House Committee. Should the committee consider it necessary for it to work beyond 12 months, an extension must be applied. Do members agree? Thank you. Thank you, representatives from the governments and the bus companies. The meeting is adjourned.
1分鐘。